Welcome to the Pinning Combination Podcast. I'm KJ Pilcher alongside Dick Briggs, ready to discuss high school and college wrestling from the last week and a little bit of a look ahead to what might be coming up. But Coach, it's hard to believe we have tornadoes at the beginning of the week, winter storm coming up. Hard to believe that we're in the middle of wrestling season, but whether or not, whether or not.
Oh yeah, I see what you did there.
Yeah, right in the thick of things.
Yesterday, speaking of the weather, I'm driving down to Solon to referee a junior varsity tournament down there, and I hear the sirens go off on the radio and the tornado warning, and it sounds like it's going in between Solon and our house, KJ.
Yeah.
So I got to Solon, checked it out, and it was actually coming more towards our house. But go figure. January, middle of January, and we're having tornadoes. So
yeah, kind of interesting. So, this last week, let's just kind of start with the Big Ten. Iowa hosted Northwestern on Friday night. The 300th duel at Carver-Hawkeye Arena. It was kind of neat. See a lot of the old faces there to kind of help celebrate that. I believe Brooke Simpson, somebody that you know well, was there, and I believe his pin of Volker was voted the number one wrestling memory at Carver-Hawkeye Arena.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think Volker was also in attendance. I thought I saw a picture of the both of them there. So maybe I'm wrong. But
wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I know they've become close over the years, both kind of working together in ministry and stuff. But that's kind of neat. I guess I didn't realize Eric Volker was there as well.
Yeah, well, at least I saw a picture. I just assumed that it was taken at Carver. But now, is this the 300 overall duel or a 300 win victory? Probably 300 overall.
Overall duel.
Okay.
The win over Northwestern gave them 276, I believe. So they're 276 and 24 all time at Carver.
Man, how impressive is that? Jeez, that's crazy.
Yeah, for sure. I guess what memories stand out to you before we talk about the duel really quick? Do you have any Carver memories or anything like that that really kind of stand out to you?
I do, but there's so many moments during the Iowa history, wrestling history, that University of Iowa's history. So I have to go to the one that's personal to me. And that was the all-star meet that was held at Carver. It's not one of those 300 meets there, but it was, the match with Mark Ironside and Kerry Colott. I mean, with personal connection with Mark and I, coach and athlete, it was, and to know that Kerry Colott was the guy. I mean, he was the guy in wrestling.
Yes.
So talented and so explosive and just about everything. And then Mark just, is the plugger. And just keeps coming and coming and coming. The Energizer Bunny, whatever you want to call it, and then that's the match. And to many, that's the greatest match they've ever seen. And for me, it's hands down the best match I've ever seen. So that's my memory.
So here are the best moments voted on by the fans. As we mentioned, Brooke Simpson's pin over Eric Volker. Number 2 was Terry Brands versus Jeff Prescott in 1992. Mark Ironside versus Kerry Colott, as you mentioned, even though not one of those Iowa duels per se, but a moment in Carver-Hawkeye Arena because it was held there. And then you had number 4, Tony Ramos's win over Jordan Oliver, which I did not see Simpson and Volker in person. Pretty sure I watched that on Iowa Public Television. But Ramos's win over Jordan Oliver, definitely the loudest that I've ever heard Carver-Hawkeye Arena in a duel.
And what was number 5?
Number 5 is Michael Kemmerer's win over Mark Hall, which was also an exceptional moment as well. Then they added number 6 was Spencer Lee's season debut against Iowa State earlier this season. But definitely for me, the Ramos, there's like a trio of them. His 2 pins against Penn State in back-to-back seasons. The Jordan Oliver win was big. Michael Kemmerer's win over Mark Hall was huge. Ironside's win over Kerry Colott, that was big. I'm going to go back a long ways to the early 90s at the NCAA tournament. The 2 moments that really stand out to me there. One was Travis Fizer knocking off I think it was Rex Coleman.
Holman, I believe. Holman.
Because he was seated like 1 or 2 and Fizer knocked him off. And I just remember being there. I think I was a sophomore in high school. It was in 1991 NCAA championships. I just remember being there with my older brother, Larry, after he won. I mean, the whole section that we were sitting in, there were people that didn't know him. They're Hawkeye fans, and we're just absolutely just turning around. It was just like 2 or 3 minutes of high-fiving each other. And then it was Mark Ryland's win over Randall and the chin whip. When that happened, I just remember that as clear as day. That was later on that same tournament. And of course it came after, watching Kerber beat Terry Brands and, Tom Brands, I think, beat Alan Freed that year in the finals. But that chin whip, and I think it came right after Tom Ryan losing to Pat Smith, almost, gave Pat Smith a run for his money at 157. And then, and I might be thinking of a different year, but I'm pretty sure it was that year. But anyway, it was that Randleman, that chin whip to pin Randleman. That by far is my favorite memory, even though it doesn't really kind of coincide with the duels.
Right.
But
and Kevin Randleman was so built like a Bo Jackson sort of an athlete. I remember he would come out. I don't know if you remember this or not, but he would come out and he would jump. Remember, he'd jump up and down, he'd jump as high as he can, like 2 or 3 jumps. And I always wanted the opponent to run underneath him when he did that. Which of course would be unsportsmanlike, and they'd never do that. But
right.
In my mind, I was, had this sick thing that the guy would run underneath him and play mind games with him. But so that's like, Randleman was like Kerry Colott, that unbeatable guy that Ryland pulls this chin whip out of his pocket and pins it. Just like that.
It was so fitting too, because Mark was so gifted in Greco-Roman, right? It was just fitting a move like that would he'd uncork that and use that to finish off an NCAA title run. And and there are others. I mean, I remember the Big Tens at Iowa with Ray Brinzer. There were plenty of matches with McElravy and stuff like that. But I think those are my favorites. And of course, the Ironside match. I mean, that I think that encompassed the whole state. You know what I mean? Whether you're an Iowa wrestler, you and Iowa State, doesn't matter. Iowa wrestling, right, as a whole, were this blue collar, hardworking, tough nose. I mean, Mark was just kind of the epitome of kind of that blue collar tough guy that, just would go after you. And that's exactly what he did, and he broke a lot. Um, and uh that was yeah, that was just something that I think just was really indicative of uh just an Iowa wrestler, not the University of Iowa wrestler, the state.
Right.
Um, and that's one of the reasons, other than the performance itself, that's another reason why that just always was a highlight to me.
Right. And so I was sitting in the stands that night with a number of people, but with John Haggerty, my
Mhm.
time coaching comrade. Uh, and I leaned over to Haggerty and I said, it's kind of funny at these all-star meets, no one really knows who to cheer for when there's not an Iowa guy out there, right? And so it was kind of quiet, really leading up until that match, and no one had cheered, and even after that match, it's kind of quiet again. But so then it comes out there, and Mark's such a likable guy. I mean, how do you dislike Mark Ironside? He just goes out and is a hammer and gets it done. And like you said, you got to pull for guys like that they're not fun, not showboaty and not anything like that. They just are tough and get after it and nonstop. And you could see, and I leaned over to Haggerty about midway through that second period, and I go, Colette's got rubbery legs, man. And then I don't know, he had I remember a little bit of a lead, wasn't it?
Yeah.
One maybe or something to that effect, and Mark had to come back from, and I just said, this match isn't over. I keep and we'd watch Mark enough to know, and obviously, so that was just a cool finish. So
Yeah. So Iowa, as we mentioned, came away with a win over Northwestern. We thought this could be a kind of a close duel, just with the way things matched up. But Iowa, outside of a couple weights, I thought looked pretty darn good.
agreed. And other than and still didn't have full lineup,
Right.
but they wrestled way a lot better, obviously, than they had in the meet 1 and 2 meets prior to that, and just kind of maybe they wrestled their competition. I don't know, but we talked about it. We thought it would be a closer meet, and Iowa just really took it to Northwestern for the most part, and it was interesting. I was listening to the Tom Brands interview with Ironside right after the meet, and Brands was a high spirited and was up there, kind of bouncing up the stairs. It sounded like was there right away, and they talked more about the polar plunge, than anything, because he was pretty excited about the meet, I think, and was said some really nice things about his athletes, and still not there, and he was already looking forward to 2 weeks from now the Penn State meet, which is kind of looking ahead, but.
Yeah, right. That could be dangerous, especially with Nebraska. Mark Manning will have those guys fired up coming into Carver on Friday. Some of the individual performances from last Friday that kind of stood out. For me, Real Woods wrestling Frankie Talshar, who was ranked 6th coming into that meet. Got to take the shot right off pretty much right off the whistle. Had a takedown in the first 10 seconds of the match, and then went to work on top. Got I believe 3 turns in the first period. Rode him the rest of the 250 and got 3 turns. Was up 14-0 at the end of the first. You could kind of see, Woods probably hasn't had a lot of mat time. You can kind of see things slow down the final 2 periods. He came away with a 17-2 technical fall still, after he got a riding time point at the end of the match. But Real Woods looked pretty good, especially building that early lead.
Right. I have a nephew out in California that was watching it, and he was texting me back and said, he says, looks like he's been wrestling with Spencer Lee in the room with the so I don't know if that's a fact or not, but he had some nice turns for sure.
Kobe Seabrecht with a big win. He had a couple takedowns against number 9 Trevor Chumbley. It's good to see him bounce back. He had that loss to Michael Carr the Friday before, didn't wrestle against Purdue, but came back, and that was a good win for Kobe Seabrecht, who looked pretty good with a couple takedowns. Patrick Kennedy, Nelson Brands. I like the way Nelson Brands finished. Abe Assad looked good in the major, as well at 184, and the way Iowa closed things with Tony Cassiope and Spencer Lee. Boy, those were kind of the exclamation points on the duel, with Cassiope getting a 3-2 win over number 4 Lucas Davison and Lee pinning number 3 Michael DiAugustino.
So you were in the arena. So tell me, how many people left before the last match?
Not too many, actually.
I was gonna say, I don't think probably many.
Yeah, it's not like a normal heavyweight where people are kind of walking up to the concourse so they could get out and beat traffic or anything like that.
Right. Another comment I'm with the Seabrecht. It's nice to see the Lisbon grads, Seabrecht and Cale Happel at UNI doing really well. So Lisbon's got a lot to be proud of for sure at the college level. Very nice.
No, for sure. Cale's had a heck of a season. Kobe's really has kind of fortified his spot there at 157. Kind of looking more complete, not just trying to hit big moves, even though, like you said, after the match or after the meet, he still works really well out of scrambles and likes scoring out of that. But I know there's work being done to where he has a go-to move, and that'll only make him better. One of the things that stands out, Cassiope, he's so big, but he's gone through a transformation where, he's always wrestled like kind of a lower weight. He liked to roll around and do things. We've seen his body kind of transform a little bit to where he's a lot more muscular than he was as a freshman. Maybe some of that's just maturation, but his athleticism in that match against Davison got in on 2 really, really good shot attempts, right? Cassiope was able to fend those off. And I'm pretty sure with leg elevated for one of them, if not both, but found a way, his athleticism, I think, is something that might get overlooked a little bit with the way he's able to kind of muscle some people around.
I agreed. And remember that transformation that he made over the summer? That was, he did a good job and worked hard at that. So, and now to go with that athleticism, and then obviously it was a smaller body at first. Now he's still one of the smaller. Well, he's not the smallest, but one of the smaller bodies in there. But very athletic. So, he makes it work. He does a great job with it, and that's a tough win. It's 3 versus 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had a nice explosive high crotch and finish, in the third period when he needed to. So, really showed, he's kind of a pretty versatile heavyweight. So that's a good win for Tony. Spencer Lee, man, I tell you what, I don't know if it might be silly to say maybe a fire has been lit kind of lit under him a little bit. Maybe he's just upped his game now that he's health. Maybe now he's just healthier finally, and we're seeing just how dominant he is at full speed. But what he's done the last couple weeks, what he did to Ramos coming back, how he just destroyed D'Agostino really in a short amount of time. Boy, it's just like he's kind of on a cheat code on a video game a little bit.
I was thinking that myself. Spencer, before injury, so before his last national championship, he was just kind of wrestling for fun. It seemed like he was just having fun out there, he's just going. And then he had that long period off, for recovery, and then he here. He's just kind of feeling it out early in the season this year, the little bit that he got on the mat. And then when at the Soldiers Salute, when that, that championship match happened, I get the feeling that he's kind of got a chip on his shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing. It's like he's wrestling with a chip on his shoulder, and he's like ticked it. Maybe still carrying that chip from that. Maybe I don't think he's upset with the coaches, but who knows where he might direct this at. And wherever it's getting directed, keep doing it, man. Because he's, when he was having fun, he was great. Man, this guy's out there for the pin. He's out there for the blood now. I don't think he wants a tech fall or anything like that. He's going to go for not that he didn't before, but I mean, really just bearing down and even when it's over, showing a little bit of celebratory, and pointing and doing some other things that maybe he wouldn't have done earlier. So I like it.
Yep. The second time he has pinned 4 consecutive opponents. So he has 4 straight pins. The last time he had 4 pins in a row, it was his first 4 matches of the 2020-21 season. So that's saying quite a bit. And I want to say that was number 46 in a row. So I think he's got a 46 match win streak, which is tied for 9th longest in the Iowa program history.
Nice. Yeah.
And
surprised it's that short, but yeah, I guess he did have one in there, didn't he?
Yep, and he's got another ranked. He's doing it against guys that are ranked guys too. These are top 10 guys. We mentioned D'Agostino, Ramos. He's got another one coming up this weekend, Friday night when they host Nebraska. We can talk about that really quickly. Nebraska was 6 ranked wrestlers, according to the latest win rankings. 4 in the top 8, and of course one of those, Liam Cronin, who's number 7 right now at 125, but still kind of expect a little bit of the same there from Spencer Lee.
Maybe he can pin his way through the top 10 ranked kids. Was it last week, number 10, and then against Northwestern, number 3, and he's just, yeah. So another thing, I guess the reason it's not as long as I thought, that 2021 season was that abbreviated season where they only wrestled in the Big Ten and started in January, and
right,
it was a much shorter season. So that's probably why that's a lower number than I would have thought.
Yep. So one of the other matchups, we're uncertain as who we'll see actually, but two ranked guys at 141 with Real Woods of Iowa. He's number 2. And then Nebraska has Brock Hardy, who's climbed to 4th in the win rankings, a sophomore. So that could be one of the big ones. At 157, Nebraska has top ranked Peyton Robb. So a good test if we see Kobe Sebrecht again this week. At 174, you've got Mikey Labriola, possibly against Nelson Brands. So that would be a real good gauge to see where Brands is, where he's at right now. He's coming off 2 wins, so we'll see there.
So basically, KJ, those two, Nebraska is favored in those two ranking wise, and then depending on what happens at 41, Nebraska could be favored there, and they might even be still. I mean, if real else there than that, but it's still going to be a close match, and then we're not done yet. Later on in the meet, some matchups.
Yeah, at 184, you've got Lenny Pinto, and Abe Assad. That's 2 ranked wrestlers there as well. 197, if Jacob Warner goes, he should be heavily favored. And then Tony Cassiope doesn't have a ranked opponent at heavyweight. So those are your kind of your key matchups, I guess, or notable matchups. Nebraska doesn't have a ranked wrestler at 165, so definitely it'll be key for Iowa to win those matches that they're favored in. Just kind of looking here, one of the things Max Mirren kind of dropped a little bit after the loss to Yaya Thomas. Kind of interesting, one of the things they were talking, he was talking about last week when we did a feature was, Terry Brands had a little heart-to-heart talk with them after last year, and you should never lose a match, giving up only 1 takedown. And now we've seen that happen, just coincidentally happen against Yaya Thomas just a few days after he said that. And then we know that Panero Johnson was a similar type of a loss for him, and we'll see if he can turn things around here against Nebraska. Thought they had wrestler in the top 20 at 149, but they do not.
Right. So, and Mirren, we talked about that last week, about putting more points on the board. And even in this loss, he put some points on the board. Thomas is I guess 3-2, but Thomas is a good, he's very athletic.
Yeah.
Wrestler, much like Johnson, like you mentioned. I'm going to go back to Sebrecht and Brands. This is a good opportunity for those two guys to knock some higher ranked wrestlers and put themselves even higher up on the on the ladder there in the rankings. So I'm looking forward to those 2 matches for sure.
Yeah, and we'll get a look and see, if they're consistent. Put matches together, not just one good match and then, kind of drop down a little bit. You can wrestle at a high level for a consistent stretch of matches. So we'll see that this Friday. It starts at 8:00 at Carver-Hawkeye Arena. I'm not sure how I like the late night starts.
Well, at least you don't have a deadline right on your tail. So I mean,
right
in the story as the meet's going on, I suppose, like in the past. Yeah.
So, Well, let's take a look at the Big 12 this last week. Not a lot of action. Both Iowa State and UNI went to Orem, Utah to face Utah Valley, both with dominant wins. But I don't know. I really like the way the Panthers kind of took care of business out there.
Right.
I
And
like the way both of them did, but the Panthers really, I thought looked good.
yeah, both teams, Iowa State, wrestling really well right now and showing it there. Iowa State ranked number 3. That's pretty darn good behind Penn State and Iowa. And then UNI 15th. I suspect that's going to float throughout the season. That UNI hopefully will climb a little bit higher, and then obviously the tournament rankings are a little bit different, but both teams did exceptionally well out there. UNI, just something, and maybe I'm reading into this. They didn't have a 97 pounder in the lineup. I'm reading that in to say that Glosser, right? Is it Glosser that's been wrestling? Glosser's there injured or something's going on there, and they didn't want to put Wyatt Volker in there and pull off a red shirt. And it seemed probably unnecessary for this duel. They could give up 6 and not have it be an issue. So maybe looking forward, if that's in fact the issue where Glosser's hurt and they insert Volker, but I guess they have 4 of them that they can do that with, though, can't they? And still not lose his red shirt. So,
yeah. And I'm a little confused on those rules too. And if there was like a certain date where you can't use those, I don't think there is. So I think he would have been clear. I wonder if it was something that was late and kind of after the fact with them traveling out there and they just didn't have a body. Not exactly sure. But
it would make sense now. So I can see both sides of having a date. The one side of having a date, cutoff date, would be that the person you're going to put in there to wrestle in your tournaments, now you can compare them in those last 4 or 5 whatever duels. Whereas if you're inserting a guy that's going to redshirt, that guy that's going to wrestle for you doesn't get the competition. And is that kind of makes sense? Anyway,
right.
And then. But then to not, I sure like not having one too.
Right. Kind of interesting. You mentioned obviously the dual rankings that really stand out. The National Wrestling Coaches and Association. Those are the premier dual rankings, and that's what most people go by. But just looking at this week's Win magazine dual rankings, Win has Northern Iowa up to as high as 8th.
In duels?
So you've got UNI at 8, Iowa State at 3, and Iowa at 2. I think that makes a lot of Iowans happy seeing all 3 teams considered top 10 dual programs right now.
That's cool. I mean, but that's kind of the rankings. Here's UNI anywhere from 8th to 15th in the rankings.
Right.
Those top 3 sound good to me, and I like that 8th one. But that's some of those teams back and forth, and it's always about matchups. And
oh yeah,
they don't have a dual championship. So I mean, every other division does, but not Division 1. So it's all kind of speculation, I guess.
Exactly. So, but you and I, they were able to post up some bonus points. Kyle Biscaglia with a fall at 133. Colin Real Buto also had a pin at 49. You had Parker Keckeisen with the pin at 187. Austin Yant with a major decision at 165. But one of the things that kind of caught my attention, even though it wasn't a victory for them, Lance Runyon back in the lineup at 174.
Yeah, and I mean, Runyon's been out, so this is his kind of his re-entry or whatever you want to call it. And I mean, it's a tough match. Demetrius Romero, who I think was an All-American last year, if I'm not mistaken. But he's a quality wrestler, ranked 7th right now and 11th in a couple of different polls. And so, Runyon wrestled him tough, but just not good enough to win. And who knows, maybe that, that time that he was out was a factor in the match as well.
Yeah. And just having him in the lineup, hopefully has a chance to keep building. And I think that helps their, that strengthens the Panthers, obviously, having him in there. So, of course, he wrestled, like I think you mentioned, wrestled Utah Valley's top guy, pretty good competitor. Works with Ethan Lofthouse quite a bit. So Iowa State, they had kind of similar results as well. They won 31-9 instead of 34-9 like the Panthers. They had falls at 133 as well with Zach Redding. Of course, David Carr made quick work of Danny Snedeker at 165. And then at 184, you had Marcus Coleman with a fall as well. So pretty similar results. Heavyweight Sam Schuler had a major decision for the Cyclones. And I think that was it for bonus. And then at 174, that was another one that Utah Valley won with Demetrius Romero again. So that just shows he's kind of the leader of that bunch. But Iowa State looked impressive going out there as well.
Right, and they had 3 out of their lineup, and remained to have 125 out. Actually 2 of their guys are hurt with Kabamba and Tarakina. So
Right.
I don't know what's going on there, and they did not win any of those 3 matches where they had their varsity out. Not that they would beat Romero anyway, but so I don't know what's going on there. You'll have that, people out of the lineup, injuries, dinged up, sickness. So hopefully they'll be at full strength. But in 2 weeks, we got some power coming down. I know we'll probably talk about that next week. Just as a little teaser, coming to UNI and Iowa State are Oklahoma and Oklahoma State on various nights. And Oklahoma State brings in 3 Big 10 champion or Big 12 champions. And then 2 of those are all Americans. Dayton Fix obviously is a runner-up, and then Caden Gefeller at 49, and then at 74, Dustin Plott, who was at 6th in the Nationals last year. So it's going to be some fun wrestling in 2 weeks, I guess, with those 2 teams. They'll be awesome.
Yeah, no, for sure. You got Oklahoma State at UNI on I believe that's Friday, or no, that's Saturday, January 28th. Then Oklahoma is at Cedar Falls on Sunday the 29th. And then obviously Oklahoma will be at Iowa State on Friday the 27th. Oklahoma State at Hilton on the 29th. So kind of interesting there. Oklahoma State going back-to-back Saturday, Sunday between Cedar Falls and Ames. Oklahoma doing the Friday, Sunday trip.
Right.
So Oklahoma having a day in between, Oklahoma State going back-to-back.
And as a casual listener, people probably don't realize there's a weight factor there. So if you're holding your weight down for the next day, that can be a factor that night. That could be a little bit of an issue there. But on the other hand, it prepares them for the national tournament where they have to do that back to back. So, and if you remember last year, you and I pulled off the improbable, going down into Stillwater and beating number 3 ranked Oklahoma State. And
right.
I think that's the first time, if I remember right, that UNI has beaten Oklahoma State in Stillwater. So that was cool. So hopefully they can keep the string going of wins over the Cowboys.
One other thing to note too, Oklahoma State's wrestling at Cedar Falls at 7 p.m. Saturday night, and then turning around for a 2 p.m. Duel in Ames. Not bad, really. You kind of think about it, that might mimic, kind of the Big 12 tournament a little bit. So a good way to kind of get guys done with a match and kind of refocus, make weight for the next morning, and then kind of get right back to it. So might mimic the postseason a little bit for Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
So what do you think about having the week off right in the middle of the season? Both Iowa State wrestled Friday and Saturday, and then you're waiting 2 weeks, just about 13 days before having another competition kind of right smack in the middle. I think it's kind of a good idea for those two teams.
Right. I don't disagree with it, because if you'll remember, during the holiday break, all three of the schools had competition of some kind or other if they chose to participate in it. The
Right.
Soldier Salute, the
Southern Scuffle.
Yeah. And so and even the well, I guess that was earlier. But anyway, so they had competition. So now is not a bad time to have a break, I don't think, because you've still got a long run. High school is starting to make, see the end with tournaments, approaching, but college, it doesn't. I mean, the national tournament and the qualifiers are in March, and it's only middle
Right.
of February. So that's a long season. It doesn't, some people look at the calendar and go, wow, it's only 5 weeks or whatever. 5 weeks is a long time when you're killing your body and wrestling.
Right. Right. Well, let's shift gears to D2. Upper Iowa had a little bit of a road trip this last weekend, right?
Right, they're up to Moorhead, Minnesota. Man, is that up there? That was across from Fargo. And the only thing above that is Grand Forks, and they're all out of the way for sure. So
yeah.
But then if that's not bad enough, then you got to go to Northern State, which is on the other side of North Dakota, and is it North Dakota, South Dakota? It's on the western end anyway. I believe North Dakota, and so that's a long road trip for the Peacocks. But they did well. They handled Moorhead 34-9 and Northern State 26-10. So good road trip for them.
Yep, and the Peacocks are 6-2 overall, and 2-0 in the Northern Sun conference. Of course, they'll be leaving the conference in a year or two. But this is a good Peacock team, and they did a really nice job at the national duels. Followed it up with a couple nice dual victories. Things get tougher, down the road, where you've got, I think 2 of their last 3 duels is St. Cloud State and Minnesota State. Parkside's in there, so some tougher battles down the road. But right now, Upper Iowa's wrestling pretty well.
Yep, having a good time. So a lot to look forward to. When I rotate into Division III and can pretty much cover everything with not going too far west of here or east of here to Mount Vernon, to the Cliff Keen, Mike Duro Classic Invitational, whatever. So the teams that were there were of interest were in this order: placing first Co College, and then Augustana was second, Cornell third, Wartburg fourth, Loras fifth, and Luther was sixth. A lot of the teams don't bring their varsity to this tournament, and becomes kind of a real good, I guess, grounds to see the youth in the programs and see where they're at with that and how their development is coming. But Co took their lineup and did a great job. They had 214.5 to Augsburg's 154.5, and then Cornell was way down at 117.5. So and some of the results: Co had 4 champs, Kate Hornback at 25, Will Esmoil at 65 from West Liberty. I like to mention all our Iowa high school kids. Tristan Westfall at 184 from Washington, and Caleb Breeze from Sigourney, champ at 285. Good to see him back in the lineup after his injury. So he came back for the national, but he hadn't wrestled prior to that. Second for the co was Alex Friddle, and Linmar's Bryce Park, West Delaware's Jared Voss, and then in third, Jaden Moore of Benton Community was third. Riley Wright from Denver Chipola, and then Matt Arsenal was also third at 97. So Co-Hawks had a good showing.
Good balance showing, yeah.
And then Cornell, like saying this, their top performer was Jacob Scherzer from Sierra.
Yep.
My last
Oh,
guy.
J-Hawk.
And then Casey Allen was also second. And then third place was Gabe Smith. And I talked to Coach Ham, went down and watched one of their practices not too long ago. And he and Coach Happel are very high on this Gabe Smith. He's out of Washington, state of Washington. He was third.
Okay.
Two freshmen at 157. And then Wartburg had one champion, Kyler Romero. They had one runner-up, and then 2/3. And then Loris, you mentioned this before, Zeb Ganida was a champion. He was from Solon and was voted the ARC Wrestler of the Week, as you mentioned. And then they had 7 that placed in the top 8. And then Luther had a second in Walter West at 285, and then they had 8 in the top 8. And looking forward to this weekend, the ARC conference hosts their ARC duels. So they split the conference in half as much as you can when you have an odd number.
Yeah.
So you have 4.
And where they're all over.
Right. You have 4 teams in one spot and 5 teams in another. And I'm actually not sure what the location this year, but on the one half, you've got Wartburg, Buena Vista Central, and University of Dubuque. And on the other, you have Luther, Loris, Co, Simpson, and Nebraska Wesleyan. And they'll all wrestle each other in duels. So on the one side, you'll get 3 duels. Each team will get 3 duels, and on the other one, each team will get 4 duels.
So I'll take a look and see where these are at. The location for each site here. I think looks like UD will be one host. Looks like Simpson and Luther will be there. Co is there as well. And so is Nebraska Wesleyan, which is kind of interesting. And this is on the ARC site. Kind of interesting that they'd send Nebraska Wesleyan to Dubuque, and yet Storm Lake, Buena Vista will host. Actually, it might be Loris that's hosting, because they have Dubuque and Wartburg wrestling at Storm Lake. So Loris must be hosting. Buena Vista must be hosting. And at Buena Vista, you've got Central, Wartburg, and UD. So kind of interesting that they're kind of crisscrossing a couple schools, but
yeah,
but I suppose those schools in the area, the travel's short enough that they wrestle those guys in the regular season anyway.
So I'm going to be sad that I won't get to miss. What's the mascot's name at BV, the Beaver that's out front there?
Buford T. Beaver.
Buford T. I won't get to visit.
Yep.
That's a neat little statue or whatever you call it out there.
Yep. He's a staple in Storm Lake for sure. So yeah, so those are interesting. I remember coming to Co or back then they called it the Iowa Small College Duels, even though essentially it was just the Iowa Conference schools getting together, so you didn't have to travel so much for weekly duels and stuff like that. Kind of knock out a handful of them at a time. So, yeah, those will be some good ones to keep an eye on this weekend. Okay. Any last words on the college front?
I think we got her covered.
So let's shift gears to the prep side of things for the Pinning Combination podcast. Dick, why don't you go ahead? You were at Jefferson this last weekend, right, at the J-Hawk?
Yeah, it was. I was rough in there, and you're pretty focused on the mat, and I don't. I mean, I can see it obviously individual matches and how individuals are doing, and when I'm sitting out, kind of watch briefly some matches there and see it was highly. I didn't realize how close it was until today. I actually looked. I'm like, holy cow! It was crazy. So there's a 16-team tournament, and Waukee Northwest won it with 214 points. Alburnett was second with 112 and a half, and Fort Dodge was third with 112. So that's away from Fort Dodge or Alburnett winning it. I mean, they to overtake Waukee. So we always say every point counts, and that win on that backside that didn't go your way, or just something that didn't happen. I mean, that would have made the difference possibly for the second and third place team in this tournament, and certainly did make the difference for Waukee, who won it. That's crazy.
I always think back to what was it, the I can't remember the year, where Solon beat New Hampton, I think, by half a point, and how many times have you seen a consolation major decision come up, or even even an advancement point winning a close match where you think, big deal. And then it turns out, yeah, it was a big deal, because if you didn't get it, you wouldn't have won. Remember the 2011 Big Ten championships with Penn State beating Iowa by a point. Penn State got falls in I think they got a fall at 125 in the 7th place match. Well, that 2 points goes from losing by a point to winning by a point. So normally you think a pin in a 7th place match, no big deal, but it really is, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And again, you're focused on officiating, but I was standing in the Solon wrestling room last night officiating the match, because they had 5 mats, one up as a junior varsity tournament, and they had the 5th mat up in the wrestling room. You're standing there looking right at the picture of that state championship team. I remember looking at it, and I remember the year, but it's not, maybe 2015. I don't remember now, but
yeah,
at least
right around there.
The picture that I was looking at was they were both dual champs and individual champs. So anyway, that was, who will forget that around here anyway, to win by half a point on that. So
yeah,
crazy. Anyway, back to the J-Hawk. Waukee Northwest who won it, had 3 champs and a runner-up, and then Alburnett had 2 champions in Brody Neighbor and Carson Klosterman, and then they had 4 runners-up, so they had 6 in the finals. And Athlete at DeWitt at 106, Rowdy Neighbor at 113, and Gunnar Keeney and Reese Klosterman were also runners-up. And they also had 2 thirds, so they had 6, 8 in the top 3. So another great performance by Alburnett. And then Fort Dodge had 3 champs and a runner-up, and then City High was 4th. And of course, they walked away with 3 champs, and I bet you can guess at least 2, if not all 3 of them, without even thinking too hard about it.
Yep. Cale Seaton, Gabe Arnold at 82, Seaton at 26, obviously, and then Ben Keeter 220. Second straight weekend, those 3 come away with titles in the same meet, the same tournament.
Right, and that's a tough tournament. I mean, some of the teams that are there, like after City High was Valley, Pleasant Valley, Cedar Falls, Fort Madison, Muscatine. Forest City had a champ and was in 10th. So good tournament for sure. with good quality wrestling.
Just follow up on that. Solon's title was in 2017, so you were really close.
17.
Looking at the final standings here, it was Solon at 96.5, New Hampton 96. So that was in 2017 for the 2A title, and one of the exciting finishes as well. I was at Marion, by the way, for the Lloyd Schaefer Marion Invitational. I got to see some good teams from all three classes. But Wilton comes away with a title there. They had 3 champs, and they had 7 in the finals actually. But Wilton, boy, I tell you what, they're good. They're balanced. They've got some high level wrestlers, but they also have just a competitive guy at each weight, it seems like. And that, I think that's what makes them so strong and dangerous as a 1A team, just that balance. And, they're going to put out a guy that, that's capable at each weight.
Right. I talked to one of their assistant coaches 2 nights ago, Sunday. They had at a youth tournament, and I complimented him on the season so far. And he said, they're a real balanced team. They may have, he thought 2 weights. I didn't ask which weights, and I wouldn't want to say no anyway. That were maybe not, at that high level, high caliber. So they're currently ranked 2nd in the coaches poll in the duels. So just ahead of Alburnett. And so Wilton's having a fabulous season for sure.
Yeah. And then, they showed it there. And it's going to be names that you're kind of familiar with too. Shirk and Brisker all the way through the lineup. Mason Shirk at 106 came away with a championship. And then you had Brody Brisker at 126, and then I want to say at 182, they got a title as well from Caden Shirk. So definitely some names that you've heard before with those families, and they looked really good. Williamsburg was 2nd. They had a champion in Gavin Jensen at 120. He was dominant. He pinned Gabriel Brisker in the finals in 227. Interesting story with Gavin Jensen. I didn't realize last year he was injured, tore meniscus, wrestled through it throughout the season. He was a state runner-up 2 years ago for Williamsburg. State qualifier last year, won his first match, and then his knee locked up in the quarterfinals. He had to default out of the tournament. So he went from state runner-up to having to default out the next year. This year, he's been pretty impressive. I think he's 26-4, has 156 career victories now. But just listening to him talk about how he wants to just get the most out of this last season. He had wrestling taken away from him. Last year was pretty bitter because it's not like, whether he got beat or not, he wasn't able to come back because of injury. It was nothing that he could really kind of control. His knee just locked up, and I think a lot of people that have had torn meniscus know, like, when it locks up, you're just kind of at the mercy of that cartilage and stuff kind of relaxing to be able to kind of get it back to where you're mobile again. And sometimes it can be quick like that. Sometimes it's not. Just really depends on how severe the tear is. Um, but it certainly was frustrated for him. He missed baseball as well. Um, Interesting that Grant Eckenrod said even when he was hurt, couldn't wrestle, he was still showing up to the room, trying to learn and do whatever he could. And if it wasn't something that he was trying to learn or watch, he was helping his teammates, trying to help them get better and kind of talking through some moves and helping them with stuff as well. That really impressed me too, because that's a mark of a true leader.
That's the love of the sport and,
Yeah.
and the love of your teammates and your peers. I mean, if you don't have that, you're not going to be in the room. You're not going to be supporting your teammates. You're not going to be trying to improve yourself when you're immobile. So, I mean, that's to me that's a guy that's all in right there. Yep.
Oh, for sure. Another we've talked about him a few times, Kill Bridgewater with a big championship for Northland in that meet. He came out, wrestled. He's ranked number one in 138 now. He wrestled number 2 Tate O'Shea from Keokuk in the finals. Keokuk in 2A, Northland in 1A, and Bridgewater won 12-0. That's coming 2 days after having 2 big wins against Brody Neighbor of Auburnett and Tiernan Boots of Lisbon in the triangular that we were at on Thursday at Lisbon. And then he follows it up with a title and that big win over a highly ranked kid from Keokuk.
And is it possible that they wrestle Lisbon again Thursday?
They're at the same site. I don't know if they'll actually wrestle each other. They might though. Tri-Rivers is a little different, but they very well could.
I knew they were at the same site, and I was like, I don't know if they would wrestle back-to-back weeks like that.
Yeah.
So it's possible. What I'm getting at is it's possible they being Bridgewater and Lisbon,
Boots,
Tiernan Boots, will wrestle again. So
yeah, and then you have the conference tournament the week after that. So we'll see how that plays out, but definitely a good end of the week for Bridgewater. Benton Community had a champ in Brendan Haying. He won 6-2 against Ronan Thomas at 152. Thomas one of 2 finalists with Will Hackey at 170 for the Saints. Haying was joined in the finals by Blake Haying at 145, and then another Bobcat in Troy Hoopka, who is a runner-up at 195 for Benton. Monticello with a champ, Cale Hansen. I think Cale Hansen kind of gets overlooked a little bit. I believe he was a state place winner 2 years ago, maybe. But he's unbeaten for Monticello, and he won by fall in the 145-pound final over Blake Haying with 2 seconds to go in the second period. So Cale Hansen having a pretty strong season. And Cedar Rapids Kennedy had a champ in Colin Falk. Interestingly, the number 5 seed, I believe, at that weight class, which really kind of surprised me a little bit. But talking to Nick LeClaire, it was one of those things where at 160 wasn't a state place winner. You have guys in different classes, so that comes into play. You had somebody from out of state because Oak Park or Blue Valley Northwest or something like that out of Kansas was there. I think they're the top seed, but Falk really dominated his way through the 160-pound bracket and beat a good ranked wrestler from Northland, Jaron Payton, 11-2 in the finals.
And that fifth seed, I love seeing that happen, especially when it's one of my wrestlers. But you're in a tournament like that, you're wrestling the from the semis on. You have to beat that number 4 seed who's seated above you. Then you have to beat the number 1 seed who's obviously seated above you, and then you have to come back and beat whoever comes out on the bottom half, which is usually the number 2 or number 3 seed. So I mean, you're always wrestling guys above you, and that's we as coaches, you talk about who's the person that's gonna beat the person they're not supposed to. Well, there you go. Dylan did that a number of times in this tournament alone, so good for him.
Yeah, and he won. He won by bonus points. I think he bonused his way through the tournament. So Colin felt really impressive, and it's kind of interesting too. You mentioned seed meetings, and I know there's a lot of pre-seed stuff done, and track I think is taking some of that stuff out. But I remember sitting through seed meetings in the past, and as a coach, be honest, how many times did you know you just had the best guy, and when other coaches would make an argument about, oh, we should be seated ahead of you, how much did you concede just knowing, fine, put us at 3, put us at 4, put us at 5, doesn't matter because he's going to win the tournament anyway.
One that comes to mind is at districts, I had Ronald Harris, who had not been on the mat much. And I said, listen, I'm telling you right now, this guy's good. You don't want him. He doesn't have much of a record. He is 5-0 coming in. I go, put him wherever you want. Doesn't matter to me. And then he went on and won a state title. so there's times when you have those, but there's other times when you're going, we want this 3rd seed because we don't want to be on the same side as Ben Keeter or something like that.
I remember, I won't say any names. One of them still coaches, one of them does not. But I did a little story on the seed meetings and stuff like that. And we're at one seed meeting where 2 coaches who had a little bit of a rivalry. I wouldn't say it was a real nasty thing. They just weren't fans of one another, and their teams butted heads quite a bit. I remember being in the seed meeting, and they were arguing over who was the number 1 and number 2 seed, and it was kind of clear cut, I thought. And one coach was really adamant about, my guy should be the 1 seed. My guy should be the 1 seed. So the other coach kind of stood up, swore, pointed at him, and said, that's fine. He can be the number 1 seed. Put us at number 8, and we'll wrestle right out of the gate, and we'll see who ends up being the best guy. It was hard not to laugh. Obviously, they went 1-2. The other coaches didn't do that, but I just thought that was kind of funny. They went from going from vying for the top seed to, fine, put us at 8. We'll wrestle in the quarterfinals and get it out of the way.
Right. And you kind of look at that. And for me as a coach, I'm going to fight hard for 1 if there's a tough number 3.
Mm-hmm.
If it's 1 and 2 and 3's maybe down a ways, then you don't maybe, you pick your battles and your mountains you want to battle on. And so there's some instances, and honestly, it depends on my wrestler too, because sometimes my wrestler would see that he was seated 2nd or 3rd or whatever, and he'd get pissed. And that was a good, now he's wrestling with a chip on his shoulder, and so, not every wrestler was like that though. Other ones would be, smoking shoulders and, no, why didn't I get that? So you got to know your clientele as well. So.
Sure. Okay. I'm going to ask you one more question. We kind of got off the beaten path here, but I'm going to ask you one more question here. What is the, maybe most ridiculous criteria somebody tried to introduce during a seed meeting? I will say this: one time one of the seed meetings I was at, they were going back to kid being an all-state baseball player and an all-state football player, and everybody was just kind of looking around like, okay, what's that have to do with wrestling? Okay, that's great on his part. Obviously, great athlete, but you know, he's 10-4 right now. We've got kids that are 12, 13-0, 10-4. You know,
Yeah, back in the day, you'd have some the criteria wasn't as clear cut. Now you've got with track wrestling, you've got lots of records, and you've got common opponents you can you can connect to, and so that makes it a little bit easier. Back in the day, I remember going to a junior varsity tournament. Haggerty and I are sitting in the seating meeting, just being real quiet because we brought a team down that was pretty darn good. It was like our third team, but we were really great back then and deep. And their junior varsity conference tournament, and I think it was at Maquoketa Valley or somewhere like that. And we had never been there. They asked us to bring a team in because they wanted another team, and it was like the day before, and so we threw one together and brought it up. And so we're being real quiet, and the other coaches are arguing and say, "Well, he beats him in the wrestling room or something like that." And I'm like, I don't know what that had to do with. And Haggerty and their records were like 2-18 and 1-17, and I'm going, neither one of these guys should be seated. And so, but we stayed quiet because we felt kind of out of place there. So
sure. Yeah. I think anybody that's been in a seed meeting, it's some can be frustrating, some can be comical, and anywhere in between. And like you said, track's kind of taking a lot of that out right now because there's a lot of different things to take care of. And I know you guys at Jefferson used to do pre-seeds where you actually had a committee kind of come in and kind of get things situated a little bit with right coaches could come in the morning and kind of maybe alter things a little bit, but you pretty much had everything in place.
There's something we really missed, you bet. And then I think Benton Community did that as well. So we kind of did that alongside them because they were the week before. And so we had someone represented each school, and so they fought hard. It was neat to see how it worked, and for their school, which would have been not a Jefferson school, obviously, but someone else. So, and their reasoning for fighting hard was they had to answer to that coach. They had to, they really took it very seriously, and we did a good job. I kind of tracked it a little bit the first couple of years, and I was real proud of our seating committee.
Oh, for sure.
There's always some that are you're just not going to get it right. That's why we wrestle them, right? Because upsets happen.
Oh, for sure, and that's what makes it great, right?
Yep.
Well, let's head over another big one in the area. The Ed Haydenfeld at Solon Clear Creek Amana finished second behind North Scott there. Clippers with 184 points. I want to say North Scott probably had about 70 points more than that, or if not more. But really impressive for the Clippers, who we saw earlier in the season against Mount Vernon. They had 12 medalists overall. Cale Nash came away with a title at 113. He had a big win in the finals over Colin Cassidy, who was ranked second, I believe, in 2A. He had a reversal in the second period, penalty points in the first and third, and won 4-3. But good showing for the Clippers.
Right, and then North Scott had actually 261 points to CCA's 184. So that's pretty impressive. That's quite a separation. North Scott had 4 champs, 2 runners up, 3 thirds, and 2 fourths. So they were, last night at the junior varsity meet at Solon, it seemed like every other match was a North Sky kid. So I asked one of their kids in there, "How many guys you bring?" He goes, "I think about 40." So they have great numbers over there in that program. Let's keep an eye on that for the future there.
That's awesome.
Anyway, and then Lisbon came in at third at 179, 5 points behind CCA, and they had 3 champs. Their chance being a 106 Wesley Sadler, 120 Brandon Paez, and of course at heavyweight Wyatt Smith. So Lisbon, they just don't have that depth, but they have obviously those champs, man. They've got a little bit of depth, but they've certainly got some holes. I know we know that they forfeit 2 weight classes. It's at 82 and 95, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep, and they're still waiting for some guys to get back in the lineup too. But yeah, it's kind of tough that they don't have that they have 2 open weights there. And when you see balanced teams like Alburnett and Don Bosco and Wilton, that's kind of tough to overcome those 12 points. But
right. I did talk to Coach Smith last night, and he said that Sadler's back, so I think he was out Thursday, wasn't he? And then their other the other guy that's been, I don't remember who it is now.
Andy Harbaugh, their 145 pounder, I know has been out.
I think he might be back for the meet tonight.
Okay.
So,
let's just touch on a couple more tournaments here before I want to talk about rivalries too, since you mentioned Lisbon wrestling tonight against Don Bosco. But Ankeny had the Bob Sharp Invitational this last week. And of course, some really good 3A teams over there, including Waverly Shellrock and Linmar with the host Hawks.
Right. Waverly Shellrock had 267.5 points to second place. Ankeny's 234. Linmar was third with 207.5. That's a lot of points to put up there. Indianola was fourth at 194.5, and then Norwalk had 136 to round out the top 5 there.
Yep.
Waverly Shellrock had 4 champs, 5 runner-ups, 2 seconds, and a 4th. So you can see how strong they are.
And one of those wins, maybe not surprising of the win. Maybe, I don't know. But Ryder Block at 138 in the finals improved to 26-0. He topped Kane Nachtgeboren a 20-3 technical fall. Block heading to the University of Iowa, but really impressive win in the finals for him.
Yeah, I'm not at all surprised that he won, but maybe by that big of a margin.
Right.
That's surprising. Nachtgeboren's a great wrestler, but Block is just another level above.
Right. And of course, Tate Nachtgeboren kind of returned the favor to his opponent, I guess. He improved to 20-2. Of course, his only 2 losses to Gabe Arnold of City High, but he was dominant as well. He won 20-5 to give Linmar a champ. There at 182, he beat Xander Kenworthy of Ankeny in the finals. Grant Crest was a runner-up. But kind of interesting seeing just kind of the tough fields. When you have you've got Ryder Block, you've got Braden Park of Linmar as well. He won by a 11-2 major decision over Waverly Shellrock. These are guys at Ankeny that we're going to be seeing on Saturday night. When you got the likes of, Ryder Block, Tate Nachtgeboren, Jace Anderson for Ankeny, who topped Grant Crest in the finals at 152. You've got McCray Hagerty from Waverly Shellrock as well. You had some, Maddox Borcherding Johnson from Norwalk, who beat Jake Walker in sudden victory. You've got some Saturday night guys in that field at Ankeny this last weekend.
Right. I'm curious to see how the CIML kind of irons out.
Yeah.
Teams there, and it's a little bit different. That's restructured, so I'm not even familiar with exactly who's in it.
kind of what's gonna go down.
I have to go look and see how it is, but yeah, some great wrestling there for sure.
Just a couple other things I want to touch on really quick. Mid Prairie had home tournament this weekend for its girls program. The Golden Hawks had titles from Gabby Robertson at 100 pounds and Ellie Brenneman at 135. They actually beat North Scott by 16 and a half points. So Mid Prairie, it's got a really good group of girls wrestling down there, and that was nice to win their home tournament. And then Oline had a really good girls tournament as well this last weekend. East Buchanan had 4 champs, placed second to Powerhouse Osage. And the team standings, Adeline Kabolka at 140, Keely Curley at 155, Brooklyn Graham at 170, and then 190 pounder Allison Crum. Each won titles for East Buchanan. They finished with 250 points, just 2 back of Osage. Some of the other area champs up there, Enamos Ava Scranton won at 120. Vinton Shellsburg had a couple champs with Bree Swenson and Chloe Sanders at 110 and 130. Independence had a champ, and Dakota Whitman. We'll see Independence wrestle West Delaware in a boys-girl doubleheader on Thursday. CPU's Winnie Gusick won at 125, and of course, Union Communities Jill Worthen, the monster, as they call her. She won at 105 pounds up there at Oline. And Cedar Rapids, Washington had Carly Klein win one of the B brackets up there. So good for her as well.
So KJ, speaking of the brackets, I don't know that the B bracket is the lower one. I think it might be the higher one because it's very confusing. They had first of all, the numbers. They had 199 wrestlers from 25 teams, and they had 25 brackets. The brackets, many of the brackets were 4-person, 2-pool, so that's 8-person brackets. And so in that pool, they'd wrestle round robin with those 3, and then they'd wrestle the champ and the runner-up and so forth. And then, but then there was some 5-person round robins where they wrestled just 5. So like for instance, there were 3 brackets at 125, and the 125, 125B, 125C. So the 125 had only 5 in it, but the B and the C had 8 in it. So I'm not sure which is my level or what, I don't know. So it's very confusing. So one of those maybe you had to be there to know what level they were at. So
yeah, that's one of the things they're going to have to work out after this first year. I know it's been crucial to get girls matches and make sure you're getting people out and getting things going, but they're really going to have to start structuring and changing the competitions a little bit, and kind of have it coincide more with a varsity JV type tier.
Right.
Do you agree or am I off?
I agree. They need to do that. Plus, on meet nights, I've been told that by some officials that they've been running boys and girls concurrently together and maybe consecutive. I'm not sure how they run it, but it's going late in the night, like 11 and past 11 o'clock on school nights and on Friday nights before they're running tournaments on Friday nights before a big Saturday meet. The officials are just getting worn thin. I got to tell you right now, that's like desperate, dire situation. So they've got the coaches and ADs and boys and girls need to get together and really, man, let's get some more officials in there and let's maybe think about the competition because you're not going to have any officials. And I'm not, that's not that's a warning, I guess.
Oh, for sure. Hey, one other thing, kind of want to point out, the Iowa Wrestling Coaches and Officials Association sent out their second set of dual rankings yesterday. Just kind of wanted to go over there. Not top teams really not a surprise. You have Don Bosco number one. You've got in 1A, you've got Osage number one in 2A, and then I believe Southeast Polk number one in 3A. Some of the area teams, Alburnett, number three behind Wilton, it's two, Nashville Plainfield's four, Lisbon five, MFL Marmac 10 in 1A. Then you've got a big contingent of Walmack in the top eight, where you've got number three, West Delaware, number four, Mount Vernon, number eight, Williamsburg. Interestingly, Independence drops to 12 there. You've also got Benton Community and South Tama kind of on the verge of the top 24 in 2A. In 3A, you've got Southeast Polk, Bettendorf, Waverly, Shellrock, Ankeny. Linmar's number five. Valley, West Des Moines Valley's dropped to seventh, which kind of surprised me. Then you've got City High number 15, Prairie 18, Western Dubuque 20. And the reason why these are significant now, more than ever, the rankings will determine the host sites pretty much. This set of rankings, in the words of the association, if possible and practical, the top 8 teams in this installment of the dual rankings will be the host sites. That doesn't necessarily mean number 8's going to host. It's going to depend on geography and stuff like that. But for the most part, you could, the top teams in this dual ranking, they're going to be hosting regionals. And then next week's rankings, the final rankings, will determine the entire field with the top 24 in all 3 classes. 1A and 2A are doing this for the first time. You've been a part of it for 3A. Do you like the system?
So it's changed a little bit, but not much from when I was coaching. Okay. And you've heard me grumble before that the coaches don't do a good job. And I'm not knocking the coaches. It's the coaches they're just very busy. They don't have time to break it down. 24 top ranked teams and look and go, and say Western Dubuque beat Norwalk at the whatever tournament, and so they should be, and so you just can't go that deep into. You don't have time. So what needs to happen is you need to have a committee, maybe of retired coaches that would have some, and just a small committee, maybe 4 to 6 or something like that, and then maybe an official or two. Though I don't know, the officials are too tagged into it, to that part of it. They'll see different individuals, but like I said, I didn't know the team score at the tournament I was at until just today. I knew it was fun, but anyway, yeah, so
other things to do.
So it's just, you just need to have, the coaches are just not able to do it. It's too much for them to ask them to do it. And so it needs to be a different system. And I think there's something going on right now.
So here's what's occurred in basketball. Okay. The IHSAA has reached out to certain individuals at different aspects of the sport, in different avenues, to be on a committee and do the rankings. So the weekly poll that they send out with rankings, it's being done by, kind of a committee. My coworker, Jeff Johnson, is on the 4A committee. So he's part of the media representation for Class 4A, the teams that, he sees most and that he covers. And I asked him to kind of give me kind of the breakdown on what is set up, and I'm going to read this message verbatim. So in each class, there are 2 former coaches and a media member. They Zoom each week with the Iowa High School Athletic Association. So there's a rep like Todd Tharp sits in on the committee, the 2 former coaches and the media member, and kind of guides them with information they might need. So they have to come to a consensus on top 10 in order. They have access to any game, past or present, on Huddle if they need it to kind of look and see, exactly, okay, so this happened, or they were playing without so and so, that kind of stuff, I'm guessing. They have an Iowa High School Athletic Association pass to get into any game, so they can watch any duel or any game for basketball wise. Wrestling wise, it would be so you could go to any tournament, any duel, and be able to assess things in person. And they'll roughly use those rankings to create 8 sub-states. So they'll use those rankings to kind of split up those top teams, in hopes to getting the best 8 to state based on those rankings. Now on Monday, they actually learn that they're going to use those rankings to help seed the state tournament. There's an unranked team that qualifies. Committee will gather to kind of give opinions on the unranked team. And the Iowa High School Athletic Association has the final say. Do you think that kind of system would work if we had somebody that watches and assesses and analyzes competition on a regular basis with former coaches that kind of know the ins and outs, have access to results, and people that can kind of give some detail on how things played out? Do you think that kind of system would work for having one of those for each class?
So your question is, will it work? Absolutely, it'll work. Will it be perfect? No. And you brought up
system.
Yep, you brought up a good point Jeff brought up a good point when he said who is missing from the lineup. I mean, you can't. There's no way possible you can dig into every dual meet and see who's missing and know who's missing. And we've been at some meets where guys have been out of the lineups and might have affected the outcome and may not have. So like for instance, Ben Keeter was out against Lindmark. Was that going to affect the outcome? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. He's a pretty big influence. So how do you judge that? So so there's so many variables. There's no perfect, but I think there's a way we can do it better. And I think that's maybe the better route.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of things being said on social media. It's hard to kind of filter through some things that they're accurate. I personally want to believe that coaches aren't voting a certain way to, for cronyism, right? To where, hey, you know what? I'll put them in front of this team, even though I know maybe team B is better, just to kind of help, my buddy's stock or their team's placement. Or, you know what? If we're going to end up being 9th or 10th, and I would rather see this team, possibly in the regional duels, I'm going to vote them here so it helps my matchup. You know what I mean? Yep. I hope coaches don't do stuff like that, and I don't think most of them would.
Well, and then go even deeper into that, not for my buddy, but for myself. Yeah. So coaches, say ranking themselves higher than they should be, and the team that might be just above them way lower than they should be to help, with the numbers to help balance that out and bump them up. And then also it's it's not necessarily the good old boy, but a lot of times this team has always been successful, so they must be good again this year, sort of thing. So,
The assumption of tradition,
right. There you go. Yeah, well said. And so, that might be an influence, and I know it. I'm sure it is probably. So, anyway, there's influences.
So we'll see how that affects things, especially going into next week when we get that final group. And the field ends up taking shape for duels, which are just regional duels are just 2 weeks away. Hey, one thing I wanted to get your a take on the big thing this week. A couple things that kind of stand out. Don Bosco's wrestling at Lisbon Tuesday. That's tonight. We're taping tonight instead of Wednesday, but Don Bosco and Lisbon wrestling this week. We've got we're both going to be at Thursday night's duel Independence at West Delaware. That's a big rivalry. You personally were a part of probably one of the top rivalries in the state, to be honest. The West Side rivalry between Jefferson and Prairie, really at its peak. I would say anywhere from maybe the late 70s to the mid to late 90s.
It was good. There were some years we didn't even wrestle. Can you believe that?
Really?
The Mississippi Valley had different teams wrestling different. So there was like maybe 3 or 4 years we didn't even wrestle it in a row.
Oh wow,
that's crazy. But yeah, it's there was some good, bad, and ugly in all of those. And in that rivalry. I mean, I could tell you story after story. Oddly enough, though, the wrestlers that knew each other got along fine. It's just this I get this picture of the dads working side by side, maybe wherever in the industry or out in construction office or whatever, and they're having their little bets, and and they're making it. They made it, and then of course that Prairie string of metro area dual wins that went for years and years, and it went over 100, and we were close touching on that a couple of times, and so that made it even more fun for the casual fan to see how that was going to turn out. But I remember going into the Prairie gym, and absolutely their old gym, and it was so crowded. You couldn't. There was kids sitting all over the floor. Our principal had a chair, and he was sitting in the middle of it, and there was no place to go. I had a person. My chair was about a yard off of the mat, and there was a kid sitting between me and my chair and the mat. And because I was on the end, and I wanted to say, get out of here, go somewhere. But he had nowhere to go, so I just let him sit there. It didn't matter. I could yell something, and my wrestler wouldn't hear me anyway. It was so loud. So.
Over the years, I've talked to people that have been a part of that. Matt Hatcher. I remember Matt Hatcher telling me that they used to have to sell tickets to prevent them kind of breaking the rules with fire marshals.
Yep.
And he said that didn't work anyway, because if we didn't get a ticket, there'd be ways we would sneak in. He talked about kind of a window where they were able to sneak in on the backside of that old gym and end up, kind of making their way into the gym anyway. Mark Ironside, speaking of that, Mark Ironside remembered, I think it was his sophomore year when he was a part of that duel, and he remembers going out of bounds and landing in the cheerleaders, and he had cheerleaders kind of pointing in his face and calling him all kinds of names, and certain names that rhymed with wussy, and he just remember going like, oh, okay, this is serious, all right, this is holy crap, this is big stuff, that it was that heated on the outside.
Right. There was some fans that on occasion decided they didn't want to stay in the stands. And maybe there's some fans that wanted to get a battle of their own going. But that's why I say the wrestlers probably behave better than the rest of us.
Right. What makes a good rivalry? Because we've seen, the Independence West Delaware rivalry has always been really exciting. They even collaborated together to create a really cool traveling trophy. We're speaking of Don Bosco, Lisbon. Those have been 1A powers for many years. Uh, Brad Smith, it goes all the way back to the late 70s. Um, uh, Dan Mashik, Tom Ketman, uh, we saw recent state dual finals that, coming down to the last match between those two programs. I mean, what really encompasses those best rivalries?
Well, it's kind of the chicken and the egg sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's these two things that stand out. One, you have to have a competitive team. And if you don't have a competitive team, you don't have a good fan base. And it's the fan base that makes it what it is. But also the fan base can make a good competitive team. If you have a good, solid fan base and support of your wrestling program, the community supports it. That brings those young athletes into the program and makes it for a strong program. And Independence and West Delaware both, they both have those incredibly great wrestling programs. They're known as wrestling communities, and so that's what. And they're in the same county. So right there, Buchanan is that right?
Just separate, because you got Del Buck for Delaware and Buchanan counties.
Yeah, so my fault. Hello. And so anyway, that close proximity obviously makes it pretty special. For us, it was the southwest side of Cedar Rapids, and when we had good competitive teams, and like West Delaware and Independence, it's always going to be a battle. And one might be ranked high, another one maybe not quite as high, but I don't care. It's still good. You don't know what's going to happen. So,
well, to prove your point, the last time we were at West Delaware, we watched the senior who was pretty much a backup end up with a fall over a state champ from the other team that made a big impact. So that right there tells you anything can happen.
Absolutely. He's filling in for the injured varsity man and ends up pinning the state champ. Go figure. I mean, that's beating the guy you're not supposed to beat. Love when that happens.
Yeah, and you mentioned that proximity. Some of the ones I kind of remember too, and interestingly connected to Brad Smith, City High and Iowa City West were some of the teams that Mark Ryland had, kind of in the 2000s. And some of Smith's teams there at City High, they really butted heads, and that would, that City High West is always a big rivalry. Even though I think the emergence of Liberty and other sports, Liberty's kind of changed the dynamic there because it's just not the two in Iowa City, but wrestling, those are still the top two. Obviously, West and Waverly Shell Rock had some doozies over the years as well.
And speaking of that, KJ, it was fun to watch the Waverly Shell Rock West back when they had the Ballwigs and the Moors. It was fun to see the coaches, and that was held after the traditional state here in Cedar Rapids at the Five Seasons Center, I believe, back then. And it was just fun to watch those coaches shift and try and get that advantage. And it oftentimes, if you will remember, came down to the two wrestlers that didn't even make the state tournament.
That's right.
Determine who was going to win the duel, and that was very fun and that was very competitive those times back then.
I won't say names again on this. The whole Dragnet line, the names are changed to protect the innocent. But I will say I remember watching a heated rivalry where the two assistant coaches in the corner who are assistants to Hall of Famers, um, in the middle of a heated duel, point to each other, point back at each other, point to outside the gym, point at each other. Both went to get up for the head coaches just to kind of grab them by their belt or their arm and set them back down. And that's you know, uh, afterwards everything's fine, but right in the heat of the moment, the always got it. I remember sitting in the corner of the mat with Wyatt, kind of pointing it out, watching it instead of watching the match, and then kind of giggling when both head coaches grabbed their assistant and kind of sat him back down in the chair while they were still watching. They were watching ahead and just kind of reached out and like, sit down, you know, settle down, cool off, just relax. Little things like that. That was, like I said, after the competition, everything was cool heads. But it's those rivalries sometimes that, kind of flare up, and they can be fun. They can be fun as long as it's handled in the right way. And a lot of those have been by the wrestlers and the coaches. Sometimes fans get a little sideways, but
I was a very young coach at the J-Hawk Invitational. We talked about this earlier, seating meeting. These are head coaches in the seating meeting that got up and went toe to toe. I'm like,
oh, wow.
nothing happened, but I'm like, is this really going to happen? I was a pretty young coach, very young coach, and
Really?
Hall of Famer coaches too. So
Really?
anyway,
You might have to share those after we're off air.
okay.
But so yeah, so we got a couple neat rivalries there. Don Bosco, Lisbon. They like to have fun in their rivalry too. I remember covering a duel at Don Bosco once where I think it might have been Ray Fox who put a caution wet floor sign in the Lisbon corner, talking about just in case your tears, for all your crying, we decided to put this over here for you. That got a good laugh from both sides and everything. Some good natured stuff like that. As well. So Don Bosco Lisbon rivalries right up there, and of course this one, Brad Smith sitting at 699 wins. How big would it be for number 700 to be kind of an upset victory over a rival like that? That would be pretty cool. And of course, we see West Delaware. Their head coach used to Independence's head coach used to be on the other side of the rivalry as a competitor, Michael Doyle, who wrestled, I believe, for Jeff Voss um, at West Delaware, now leading the Independence program. They've even met in the state dual finals, here recently. So that's a big one that really look forward to on Thursday.
Yeah, Crazy Ray. Is a college teammate of mine. I can definitely see him doing that. That guy's got a mind that works on a different. Yeah, he's a funny guy.
Yeah, very very fun personality for sure. Well, any final thoughts from this week, from anything we went over? Or?
No, I think we got it.
Okay, where are you going to be at? I'm assuming you're officiating again this weekend.
I'm at Anamosa this weekend for the boys.
Okay, so there, I think I'm going to head to Prairie for a girls tournament before they get ready for next week's super regionals. So interesting. We're coming into the final 2 weeks of the girls season, so it's gone pretty fast. Make sure you head out and check all the action. We've got duels on. Actually, duels on Tuesday, duels on Thursday, tournaments on Saturday. So a lot of boys and girls wrestling action to go out and catch tonight, this week. You can check out the Gazette coverage at thegazette.com. Just like to thank everybody for watching us each week. We really appreciate it and appreciate the support. Make sure to come up and say hi to us if you see us out at events and and stuff like that. And go ahead, Coach, send us out with Wyatt's message for wrestling.
Let's keep wrestling on the move.